Los Angeles, American Airlines 11, according to authorities in Boston. The Federal Aviation Administration has now grounded all planes right across the United States, fearful of what might happen next and what other intentions those who've coordinated this attack might have. President Bush, who was speaking down in Sarasota in Florida, called this an apparent terrorist attack. That's literally as the news was coming through. This is the scene now from downtown New York. One can imagine the chaos there, but also this is going to have a massive effect on the infrastructure of the United States on the eastern seaboard. There, the Pentagon, you can still see the smoke rising from one part. Apparently, the airliner hit the helicopter pad, which is just across the main freeway from the Potomac River. That's eyewitnesses saw the tail of the plane go into that helicopter pad, which is just outside one of many doors in the Pentagon, which of course is the Defense Department. That is only one small part of the Pentagon, because below ground, if my memory serves me correct, there are at least 7 floors. This was built expecting some kind of nuclear attack one day, and that's where the most heavily defended and protected parts of the Pentagon are, well down deep into the bowels of Virginia there, across the river. Here we have the center of New York. Not only the World Trade Center, but reports saying the UN headquarters has been evacuated, with people being ushered down into the basement of the UN headquarters, which is a little bit uptown from the World Trade Center, which is right down on the southern tip of Manhattan. Well, let's go to another witness of the World Trade Center attack, and he said he saw people jumping from the building.
And we looked out at it, and all of a sudden, boom, it seemed like it wasn't even real. And we came running over here closer to the place, and all of a sudden we saw the other explosion. I don't know. You know, that's all I saw. I saw a couple of people jumping out of the other building. I've seen 2 or 3 people jump out of the building. The first one, I don't know if that's number 1 tower, number 2 tower. It's unreal.
Downtown New York there, and there the scene across Manhattan. A scene where, in normal times, you'd expect to see at least 2 towers of the World Trade Center. They have now both collapsed following the hijack of at least one aircraft, which was flown directly into one of the towers. That collapsed about 40 minutes ago. The second one collapsed a few minutes ago. There's the shot of the southern tip of Manhattan. Over to Washington to Stephen Speech. Stephen, what do you have?
Well, the latest is that in addition to the attack on the Pentagon, the fire there, the airliner crashing into the helicopter launch pad, there has been a car bomb outside the State Department, the headquarters of U.S. foreign policy. The building's been evacuated. We don't have reports of any casualties. President Bush, who has been in Florida this week, is heading back to Washington. And we also have, this is quoting the CBS television network, this is to give some idea of potentially the scale of the tragedy in New York. CBS are saying that of the 2 planes that crashed into the World Trade Center, one was from Boston, the other was from Dallas, and it's possible that on board there may have been 150 people.
Now, what is the scene in Washington at the moment? Can you see out across to the smoke across the Potomac and the level of smoke which is coming from there?
It's difficult for me here in the studio to see that, but I think a sense of great shock here in Washington. So far, it seems that in terms of casualties, we don't have anything like the sort of tragedy that's unfolding in New York. But in terms of the explosion that went off at the Pentagon, knocked people to the ground, car bomb at the State Department, I think a lot of government buildings, if not all of them, have been evacuated. Certainly the Capitol, the Congress building up on the Hill, the State Department, the White House, the Pentagon, the Treasury, all those seem to have been evacuated. And I wouldn't be surprised if all the other government buildings have been evacuated too.
Now, Stephen, in recent years, certainly the Secret Service, the FBI, and all the intelligence agencies have insisted that there be much better protection from ground attacks, certainly, against those who might wish to drive or try to drive up to the White House, Congress, or whatever. But clearly this is not enough in this kind of situation.
Well, we know that the United States, some people would say that they're obsessed with security here, but clearly, however far you take security precautions, one has to ask the question, is it ever going to be enough? We know that President Bush wants to defend the United States from attack by missiles with his missile defense program. Some people think that's possible, others think it isn't. But when you have people who are absolutely determined to carry out these attacks, determined, it seems, to lose their own lives in the process, it really does make us ask the question, how far is it possible to avoid incidents like this? Planes can fly at low altitudes. They can avoid detection by radar. We had the incident 20 years ago, this is going back some way in time, where a young German pilot flew into Moscow, into Red Square, after flying right through Soviet air defenses. And it seems that even today it's still quite possible for that sort of thing to happen. So, of course, we're going to have people raising the issue of greater security here. But, as I said, we have to ask the question, is that possible to really totally protect these buildings?
Now, for those of you who are just joining BBC World at this point and wondering if you're watching an unreal scene, this is real scene from downtown New York, shortly after this plane crashed into the World Trade Center. It had been hijacked a short time earlier on a trip, we believe, from Boston. We understand it was an American Airlines plane en route from Boston to Los Angeles, flight American Airlines 11, and that was what began what has been a cataclysmic 2 hours in the United States, because a second plane was hijacked, a third plane was hijacked close to Washington and has been flown into an area which is just to the side of the Pentagon, across the river from the White House, Congress, the executive buildings, the Treasury buildings, the World Bank, and all the main offices of state. That a reminder of the terrible incident which began this trigger, this timetable of dreadful events across the east coast of America. There is the Pentagon, the southern part of the defense headquarters, the brain of the American political, at least, defense system. Of course, they have a large number of bunkers and other secure areas scattered right across the United States, down in Florida, Cheyenne Mountain, across in Colorado, many other secure areas, and indeed there are provisions within the American procedures for the President, Secretary of State, and others to take shelter along with those who have to make the critical decisions. Here the scene on the ground in New York, and not that I'm there, but it does look as if you can see, you can get a sense of the enormous amounts of dust and debris and everything else which have been blown and literally across in a typhoon from the bottom of the World Trade Center after first the first tower, then the second tower collapsed at the bottom of Manhattan. That distinct landmark at the bottom of Manhattan. And that's the scene in what is left in that area alongside the World Trade Center. Ola Guerin, our correspondent, is joining me from Jerusalem. Ola, how is this being viewed from the Middle East?
Well, there's an enormous sense of shock here. People have been glued to their television screens with mounting horror, watching the events unfold. I should say that it's still in no way clear that the events taking place in the United States are at all connected to this region, although obviously that must be the fear, and there's a great deal of speculation of that kind. We did earlier on have one anonymous claim of responsibility that was made to a television station in Abu Dhabi, and a caller claiming to represent a radical Palestinian faction, the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine, claimed that they had carried out the hijackings and they had attacked the World Trade Center. Now, I should stress that since then, official spokesmen for that organisation have been at pains to say that they were not involved. They issued a statement saying that they were against hijacking planes and against endangering the lives of civilians who were not connected to the struggle here in this region. We have been receiving reports in the last 10 minutes or so of celebrations taking place in Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon, and also of impromptu celebrations taking place on the West Bank. And I think that's something that isn't a great surprise. Many Palestinians here do regard America as being pro-Israeli and will often express anti-American sentiments, but I don't think we can extrapolate too much from that at this stage.
Now, all stand by, because I've got more disturbing news that, according to reports reaching us from Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania, another large plane has crashed in western Pennsylvania. That is according to news agency reports quoting officials from Somerset County Airport. I can't tell you precisely where Somerset County is, but just to say, these are unconfirmed reports from western Pennsylvania, from Somerset County, that another large plane, and that means, from what we know at the moment, that means there have been 4 aircraft hijackings, apparently synchronized, attacking, so far as we can see there, the enduring symbols of American power, many of which have now been evacuated. The president has been down in Florida. Now, the first event was just before 9 o'clock on the World Trade Center. There you can see the images from a helicopter of the smoke billowing across the lower Hudson River, across towards the Statue of Liberty. And we've got the eyewitness view of a man who was in B Tower of what was then the World Trade Center.
I was in B Tower.
B Tower?
A Tower.
What floor were you on?
B1.
What floor?
The first one.
What happened? Tell me.
When a big explosion happened, some guy came out, his skin was all off. I helped him out. This is him all over. There's people jumping out of windows. I've seen at least 14 people jumping out of windows. It's horrific. I can't believe this is happening.
Anything else that you saw? Were you there for the second hit by the plane?
About 10 minutes later, the second building went off.
Did you see it?
Yes, I saw it. It just blew up. A big explosion. People started running. It was just chaos everywhere. People jumping out. People just kept jumping and jumping and jumping. And you could still see they were alive because they were flailing around.
The FBI has already stepped in to investigate. It could be possibly a terrorist strike.
It could be. It could be, because the first one went off, and then 10 minutes later, this just blew up out of nowhere.
Hard to think that would just be accidental.
No, I don't think it would be accidental.
Back it up, folks. Back it up.
Well, there you got a glimpse in the background of what was then one of the towers of the World Trade Center. Both the main towers have now collapsed less than 2 hours after an aircraft which had been hijacked from Boston was flown directly into one of the towers. Jane Stanley in New York.
Hello, Nick.
Yes, Jane. Tell us what you have, where you are at the moment in New York City.
It's complete and utter chaos, panic and terror. People cannot believe that this has happened. They watched the initial events unfold even less than 2 hours ago, and now one of the enduring symbols of New York is no more. The 2 towers of the World Trade Center have collapsed. People are desperately trying to find their family members, but the telephones largely don't work. All cellular phones are knocked out. There were 50,000 people working in the World Trade Center. Many of them, the majority of them, had arrived at work this morning, and people are unaware of many of their whereabouts.
Now, Jane, let's just put this into, it's terrible enough at the moment, let's put it into even worse perspective. What we're talking about there is essentially the scenes we're seeing at the moment covering the whole of the Wall Street area and beyond. And much of American business orientates around this whole area, into which the rubble of the World Trade Center has now collapsed, along with telecommunications and who knows what else.
Indeed, and you can imagine some of that rubble falling even at the first impact and the second impact on the trade towers just before 9 o'clock in the morning New York time, and a very busy time. A lot of people already in their offices in that area, and the streets packed with people. You can barely get down those streets on a busy day, and the rubble was falling 110 floors, and people were falling as well, as they were desperately, some people trying to jump out of the windows of the World Trade Center as it was on fire. Now those buildings are no more. New York's famous skyline doesn't look the same. I don't think New York feels the same place. People are incredibly frightened of what might happen next. They're hearing stories from Washington, of course, where there's been the attack on the Pentagon. Now we're hearing of a car bomb at the State Department. They're asking what next. And people want to go. They want to get out of this city. All the bridges and tunnels to Manhattan are closed. The airports are closed. There's a feeling of America almost under siege here. Ordinary people just don't know what to do.
It's almost as if someone had written a film script and no one would ever have believed it before.
You couldn't have put it better, actually, Nick, because when I first saw this first thing this morning, I couldn't believe it. And I couldn't believe anything so horrific and so astonishing as a sight to be seen. And then, of course, this whole series of events has just unfolded more and more. Clearly a very well-planned, very well-coordinated attack. The hijacking of the American airliners flight, we now know, Flight 11 from Boston to New York. No one knows how many passengers yet, that hasn't been confirmed, were on that plane, the plane that crashed into the World Trade Center towers. I mean, it's almost Orson Welles, isn't it?
We're now seeing the courthouse down in Lower Manhattan, Jane. Are you able, I know you've been talking to us and our other BBC colleagues elsewhere, but can you give us a sense of what the radio stations and television stations are telling people what to do now, and the police?
Well, the police were just desperately trying to get people evacuated out of the immediate area. I mean, clearly fearing that the World Trade Center Twin Towers would collapse, and indeed they were proved right. And another building next to the World Trade Center has also collapsed. But I haven't been able to listen to the local stations. I'm afraid the local television stations are running this in very American style as a drama. I think they're just going from minute to minute as we are. It's, as I said, it's less than 2 hours since this first attack, and New York just devastated, and scenes of terror and devastation in Washington as well.
Jane, we'll be back with you as soon as we can be for news of what the police and others are now warning about what people should do in New York, both in New York and obviously beyond into New York State. Let's now go south to Washington, where the Pentagon has already been hit by a hijacked aircraft, where I'm joined again by Stephen Sweech. Stephen, a car bomb outside the State Department, many of the agencies being evacuated. What's the latest?
Yes, car bomb outside the State Department, and on a bigger scale, this attack on the Pentagon. Now, I was talking earlier about the airliner, it seems, having come down just beside the Pentagon. But I've just been looking at pictures from the ABC network, which show part of the Pentagon apparently having collapsed, and that part of the building also on fire. So it seems that part of the Pentagon has indeed been hit by something. If not by that airline, then by something. Too soon to talk about another explosion. But again, the magnitude of what's going on in Washington becoming a little bit bigger, I think.
Now, just stand by, because news agencies, we have to say there is, I think, the second tower collapsing, the World Trade Center tower collapsing. It did so about half an hour ago. That is in New York. And as we watch again with horror that image, wondering how many people are up there, how many people are underneath, how many people may have survived, how many people from the rescue services were underneath, fire tenders and so on, I have to report to you that more detail is coming in of the plane which we gather has crashed in western Pennsylvania. The AP news agency is reporting that a large plane, believed to be a 767, a Boeing 767, crashed at about 10 o'clock local time. That's about 50 minutes ago, about 8 miles east of Jennerstown. That's according to the 911, which is the emergency service dispatchers, reported by local television stations. The airport is about 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh, and that is the latest we have of what appears, from what we know at this moment, to be a fourth plane, which appears to have been hijacked with what one has to describe now as some kind of evil intent. Now, what's important to remember is that about an hour and 20 minutes ago, the Federal Aviation Administration, which administers all airspace inside and over North America and certainly the United States, grounded all planes, issued a nationwide order that all planes should be grounded and none should take off, fearing, of course, that something much worse, if that's at all possible, might be threatening. So there we have the scene of downtown, the southern tip of Manhattan. On the left, well, now you can see the human cost for anyone, whether you're a civilian who tried to get to work or someone from the emergency services. These images coming in, and we switch immediately from New York to the Pentagon, where we've just heard from Stephen that part of the Pentagon, that above ground, was demolished, has been demolished, has collapsed. Just for those of you joining us, wondering if you're watching an unreal scene or a film, this is actually reality in Washington. There, the image of the Pentagon, the Defense Department, across the river from the White House. That's the image on the left. And on the right, although we're jumping around, just let me finish what was happening in the Pentagon. A large plane apparently hit the helicopter. There we have it, the helicopter pad, which is just outside, located outside the Pentagon. The five-sided building that is the nerve center of the American defense establishment and the enormous assets of the American superpower. Just to confirm, this, as far as we know, was the third plane which was hijacked and was then flown directly in to the Pentagon. The second and first planes were involved in incidents around the World Trade Center. One of them was hijacked, and the image showed the plane, an American Airlines plane, en route from Boston to Los Angeles, American Airlines 11, flying through the World Trade Center. There is that appalling, horrifying image. The kind of thing we only thought up to now was probably in the imagination of film directors. This is, I have to underline, reality. These are pictures coming in as I speak, and pictures, it looks to me like downtown Washington on Lafayette Square, across from the White House. There, if I see correctly, you can see one of the main entrances across Lafayette Square, where a large number of anti-terrorist devices, enormous pillars, and other devices have been erected in recent years to stop car bombs being driven at high speed into the White House. There it looks to me like the top of the White House. And this, the fountains inside the main garden. These pictures are coming to you, I think, if I read them correctly, from just outside the White House. Of course, the White House, literally within 3 or 4 miles of Reagan Airport, Ronald Reagan Airport, formerly National Airport, which is the way in and out for congressmen, all the big businessmen, and so on.
I'm scared to death, and I'm praying for all of us. I am.
This video is arriving at BBC World Raw, and so we're just giving and transmitting it to you as it comes in. Images around the White House, around Lafayette Square. The White House, we gather, has been evacuated, although I think we did see some Secret Service officials on top. Now, one of the interesting things, of course, is that a few years ago there was a man with a light plane who tried to fly in to the White House.
Not just for my convenience, but for probably the hundreds of people that have already died. It's shocking.
But I'm frustrated with the country as a whole that we don't take a strong stand against terrorism. This had to happen. As long as we're going to let people off the hook in the Mideast, Iraq, Iran, and places like that, when they blow up buildings in Beirut and places like that, if we don't take a strong stand, this is going to continue. And it was just a matter of time.
That raises an important point. Terrorism has finally come to the United States in a way which American officials have long feared and dreaded. It's the doomsday scenario. It always seemed to stop at the American eastern seaboard. It always happened elsewhere. And now that is the very human reaction of someone in downtown Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, to what has happened. Now, although it seems a bit unreal to even read this to you, because of the horror of what we're seeing in the Pentagon and we've been seeing at the World Trade Center and downtown, there we have it, downtown Manhattan, the southern tip, all the blocks in southern Manhattan, we were hearing from Jane Stanley a short time ago, the place paralyzed by disaster, human tragedy, and the US Securities and Exchange Commission Chairman Harvey Pitt has said that the US securities market has decided not to open for trading after the aircraft crashed into buildings in New York and Washington. He did say in a statement, and I quote, that trading will resume as soon as is practicable to do so. But one has to underline that much of Wall Street and the dealers in the United States, right, we're going to Yasser Arafat, who is now speaking
to his government, to the American people for this terrible act. We are completely shocked, unbelievable.
Thank you.
There we had commiserations, expressions of regret from a very somber looking, that from the Reuters news agency in Jerusalem. Yasser Arafat being interviewed, offering a few words of horror himself at what has happened. And there we see, just to underline what Harvey Pitt, the US Securities and Exchange Commission chairman, has said a few minutes ago, that normal trading will resume as soon as it's practicable to do so. But underneath all that smoke down there is what we loosely call in two words Wall Street, which is the heart of the financial services of the United States.
Reuters television. What do you think about what you're seeing?
It's just awful. I mean, it's incredible. It's just, I can't imagine how many people are dead. Just the most amazing situation. It's awful. I hope they can figure out a way to get to terrorists because it's got to stop. Amazing. So I don't know, not much is being said about people on the ground, but that was a hell of an explosion when the building collapsed. It appeared to collapse. I mean, think about it. You know, one tower of the World Trade Center collapsing on top of all the people on the ground. So I wish they would come up with some kind of thoughts about what's going on the ground. Millions, I mean, thousands of people, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands are going to be touched by this. So it's the worst. Never seen anything like it. I mean, Kansas City, less than 200 people. This is going to be thousands.
Where are you from?
I'm from New Jersey.
Okay, and what's your name, please?
Karen Furman.
How do you spell it?
F-U-R-M-A-N.
These are the very human reactions of what you're seeing in front of you. Can I just confirm now that according to United Airlines, an official in Paris said one of the two planes that crashed into what were the two twin towers of New York's landmark World Trade Center was a Boeing 737 from United Airlines.
And one World Trade Center hit somewhere on the 67th floor. I was on the 56th.
And was it chaos trying to come down the steps?
Yes.
What was it like? Describe it.
Everybody was on top of each other trying to come down, and then somebody finally calmed the crowd down to get them to come down the stairs in an orderly fashion and get them out of the building.
And what just happened now?
The building just came down. One of them, I don't know which one came down. I don't know if it was one or two.
What did you start doing when that happened?
Running. Like everybody else, but trying to calm the people down while they were running, because I told them this is how people get hurt. Is that when they start trying to, get out of the way, and it's just crazy. I just thank God I made it down from 56.
What's your name?
My name is Debbie.
Debbie, your last name?
Troy.
Troy, and where do you work?
I work at...
Now, just to confirm, let's clarify where we've got to. We were heard that two United Airlines planes, had been hijacked and hit the tower. We now know that one of them was American Airlines Flight 11 from Boston to Los Angeles. The second was United Airlines Boeing 737. Now, joining me here in the studio is Stephen Simon, who was a counterterrorism expert. You still are, Stephen Simon, and you were in President Clinton's National Security Council until 1999. You were planning, you were assessing intelligence, fearing something one day like this might happen in your National Security Council. Is this the doomsday scenario?
Nick, this is about as close to the doomsday scenario as could be contemplated. I'm a bit shook up at the moment. This is a devastating thing. But yes, attack by air was contemplated. It's obviously an extremely difficult thing, if not an impossible thing, to counter.
Okay. Now, were you expecting that one day something like this would happen? Did you have the systems in place to ever stop this? Were they planned for?
The question really, Nick, is how one stops it. It is actually, and under these circumstances, perversely true that it is illegal to destroy a civilian aircraft in flight. It simply cannot be done. So even if it were known that these planes were on a trajectory headed into these buildings, it would have been a problematic scenario.
Right. Stephen, wait one moment, because we can go live to Washington.